folks, thanks for joining me here today for January's Our Mixed Media Moods. I hope you liked the mood board that you saw in the opening here of this video. I put this together and I'm really excited to show you sort of the process that I went through to create this 6x12 artboard. So I have some natural elements and I have this giant panel. This is from Dick Blick. And then I have some like vintage ephemera and kind of different pieces. Some of it's pattern paper and tissue paper and things like that I'm going to collage in the background of this board. And yeah, so some things are going to go by quick and then I'll slow some things down, some other things so you can see them. I am using a fluid matte medium to collage with here. So I put down some matte medium and then I put down the paper and then the matte medium goes over that. And I'll just continue to collage on top of this board until I'm happy with it. I'm not thinking too much about composition because this is just the base layer and it's even barely just gonna poke through in our finished project anyways. So collage through and get some pieces down. And then I'm coming back in now that that has had time to dry with some gesso, and I am whitewashing the board now. So I'm adding gesso with a bit of water, and it's just creating kind of like a nice tone that helps the background be the background and not be too in the foreground. So it just kind of knocks it back a little bit. And then I'm also using some gesso to kind of scrape in from the edges and just help camouflage some of those straight rough paper edges from my collaging. Also, while you're working on projects like this, either tall canvases or boards, don't forget to keep your sides, make your sides have a finished look, I guess I should say. So you can either do that by keeping the same color and materials wrapping around the sides or by just painting them a solid color at the end. Now I have out some golden high flow acrylics and I have 3 colors that come from the mood board. I've got this gorgeous quinacridone magenta, and then this is I think it's a naphthol red. I'll have to double check that. All the colors and all the product names and links will be in the description, both the blog post and the YouTube video for this. And then I had this quinacridone nickel azo gold, and the colors are perfect and they really do scream like kind of like dead on to what's happening in the mood board. But once I had the colors down on my board, it felt very overwhelming to me. So I decided to knock that back. And the first way I did that was because the first way that I did that was by spraying the acrylic and then mopping it up with a towel. And because it's acrylic and it hadn't dried yet, I was able to pull up quite a bit of the color, but I do want those colors to peek through. So I didn't scrub them all off, which I could have done with some alcohol if I really wanted to. So I dried those and then I came back with some more gesso and kind of knocked them back a little bit more. Now they're sort of a pastel version of what I was working with before, but they are still a very kind of cool color combo I have going on. I'm now using some heavy gesso rather than the sort of thinner gesso that I used before, and I am kind of doing the same thing I did in a previous step. I am scraping this gesso back and forth across the board to kind of cover up and push back some of those layers that I've created. So I know when I first started doing mixed media, and even when I was first getting into fine arts and things like that, I would worry a lot about covering up the work that I did previously. But I have since learned that it's just another step in the story. It's just another layer of the visual story that we're telling on our paintings. So, you know, when people start doing intuitive painting and they're kind of just going with whatever they want to do, they're putting marks and they're slapping stuff down, it's not always going to be the finished product. And you just have to learn not to fall in love with your painting too early, or your project in general, even if it's mixed media or your quilting or anything like that. So keep that in mind, okay? Now that heavy gesso has had time to dry and I've got layers on layers on layers here, I have come in with that that gorgeous magenta color, and I've added some glazing medium to that, and then now I'm glazing my board. So I kind of slather it all over the board, and then I use baby wipes to wipe up the excess, and that paint is going to be stuck in those grooves that I can't really get to with the baby wipe. I'm like purposely not pushing down into them because I want to highlight the texture that I've created on this piece so far. So now it's got this kind of cool pink tint to it, and at first I think I really like it. And then as I sit there and kind of look at it and tilt my hood to the side, I decide that it was way too pink. So I wiped off some more. It is okay, right? Because it is my painting, and even though I don't necessarily need to be in love with every layer, I still have to like each layer. It's no biggie. Just wiped back some more of that magenta. And then I decided that I lost too many of the collage pieces that had happened in the background, so I am going to collage on a few more. And previously I used some vintage book text and some music note and some tissue paper. This time I pulled out a dictionary page that has really small writing on it, really small type, and then I have some Tim Holtz tissue tape. So this is really cool. He's got a really great design eye, and it has some fun script, and then I love these really big bold numbers, so I kind of pulled those out and put those on. And I'm not thinking too much about composition again because I'm still working on the background and kind of building up these layers. But also I don't want text across the whole thing. So that's an aesthetic thing for me. And I really like when text and script and numbers and things like that kind of peek in and out, and they don't necessarily flow over the whole board. They're just little spots here and there. And layer those up a little bit. Oh, and I'm using the matte medium again. So matte medium, paper, and then matte medium again. And I can use my heat tool to kind of help these layers dry a little bit quicker. And I was trying here a technique from Dina Wakely. She's a scrubber when it comes to paint. And so she has these paintbrushes that have very stiff bristles on them. And she kind of scrubs her paint on her background rather than like kind of like big fluid motions. She has kind of cooler, shorter, scrubby motions. I know it sounds kind of funny, but that's the best way for me to describe it. So I was trying that, and it wasn't really working well for me. I think it's something that I sort of need to practice, as funny as that sounds. So I set that to the side, and then I got back out my trusty palette knife and my heavy gesso, and I'm just blending in some edges here again and kind of pushing back a little bit more of that pink. To me, in the beginning, I was really aiming for those stark, super bright, intense, bold colors. But as I was working on this piece, that didn't end up working well for me. So now I'm going to end up with this kind of pink tone, and it's very cool, and it's so subtle in the background, and I love it. So my gesso has had a chance to dry again, and now all my layers are dry on my board. So that's a really great place for me to move on to the next thing. So now I want to kind of tone the whole board and pull it together as one cohesive piece instead of all these different layers. It's time for me to make the whole piece, one fabulous fancy layer. So I'm glazing again, and this time I'm glazing with a gray, and the color will be in the bottom of the description, either in the blog post or on the YouTube video. Again, just want to make sure you're aware of that because I don't always know exactly the color I'm using while I'm talking about it. But this is, I believe, a transparent gray. And I'm just adding some glazing medium to that. And so the same thing happened here that happened when I did the pink. And it just kind of settles in those recesses and creates a really nice tone around the whole page. And I felt like I had wiped a little bit too much off because I was going for sort of this kind of dirtier effect, or this like more grungy type style. So I did it one more time, and just with whatever paint was left in there. And then I can heat that dry, especially this layer because it's so thin. It's really easy to just heat it with a heat gun, and then I'll be able to move forward. Now I want to create a frame. I want my edges to be very distressed and grungy, and so this is a fluid acrylic that I'm using. Not a high flow acrylic like before, but this is between like a soft body and a high flow. It's called fluid acrylic. And I am running it across the edges in a very thick way. I'm just leaving it like 100% paint towards the edge. And then I'm using a small brush with water in it, and I'm just bringing that paint out towards the center and kind of feathering it out, and it just fades away towards the middle, and then it just looks like kind of like a distressed darkened edge or toned edge to my painting, my mixed media painting. And at first I start by going just all the way around the whole edge at all four sides. And then as I'm kind of looking at it and I'm getting a really good close look at some of the textures that I've achieved with the different layers and the gessos, then I decide that I'd like to go back in and kind of highlight some of those. So in a couple places here in the background, I'm going to add some more of that gray paint. And I'm going to let it kind of seep into the cracks and crevices. And I can aid that process by adding a little bit of water to it and just making it even a little bit more fluid. And then it kind of settles into the recesses and it pools away from the ridges, the high parts of my texture. It's very cool, and it's pretty simple to do. You know, it's one of those things like you kind of just play with it until you get it, and then you know exactly how to do it from there. So I definitely suggest or recommend trying out this technique. It's a really great way to you have real texture in there that you've built up from all these layers and the gesso and the scraping and the grunginess, and then you're just accenting it with the paint and making that real texture look even bolder. Just like that. Yum. That's what I'm talking about, friends. When my kiddo was a lot younger, he would say, "That's what I'm talking about, baby." Oh, it's so cute. All right, so just doing that same thing, highlighting some texture. Oh, and this month is really exciting. So we have Jen here doing our mixed media moods. She's my co-host. We've been hosting this together. And we have a guest designer joining us, Fiona. She's from Australia, and she's uber fabulous. So definitely check out both of those girls' projects. There'll be links below. You can check out that awesomeness. I did take whatever gray, excuse me, whatever gray was left in my little plastic cup, and I am coloring the sides of my board. So I mentioned that earlier. You can do two things to really make your piece look finished. You can either keep the same colors going and like wrap your whole project around the side of the board, or easy peasy at the end, you can just paint it one solid color like a black, a white, a gray, a brown, or even like one of the colors from your painting. I like to try and keep it going the whole way around, like wrap it around. All right, and so now that all of that is dry, all my layers are 100% dry, I am going to cover my board in wax. So this is actually an encaustic medium, and to the left there I just have a griddle with a little tub in there, and the wax has all melted. And so it's actually wax. It's a mixture of wax, beeswax, and resin. And I just buy it already mixed. It's easiest for me that way. And maybe when I get more and more and more into encaustic, then I will learn to mix my own. But for now, I just buy this already. I buy it in about a 2-pound bag. And I am covering my board here in about as even as a surface as I can get. I did just make a little bit of a mistake there. So I just want to point that out. Yep, it happens for sure. I was able to quote save unquote my piece. My piece isn't ruined, but to be really sure when you're working with encaustics, after you put down one layer, and what you do is you take the hot wax from the container to your piece and you go as much as you can in one solid motion from one edge to the other when you're covering an entire piece like this. Then you do that from one side to the other after the whole piece has one layer. And what you should then do is fuse that single layer. And then you come back with the second layer. And after the second layer is done, then you fuse that one. And then you come back with your third layer. I did not fuse between layers. This heat gun gets very, very hot. It's different than just a dryer, like a craft dryer. This is a super industrial gun. It has like 100 temperatures on it. Like, see the dial? You can turn the dial at the back, all these different temperatures, and then the little on button, it has off, low, and high. So low and high, and then both of those can be turned on the dial. So as I was heating here, what I'm really doing is fusing and kind of helping the wax even out and create a nice even layer. I realized that I forgot to fuse between the layers, and I am really new to encaustic, but I did know that I was supposed to do that. So what I'm doing here, and this is not like foolproof, you have to kind of be careful with this, but I am almost overheating my wax. I'm not burning it, but I'm creating almost like a liquid pool across the whole board. That way all the wax can kind of fuse together to create one nice heavy layer instead of 3 thin layers that may break apart later if they hadn't been fused together. So I'm cheating a little bit here. I'm totally not going to lie about that. My suggestion to you, instead of doing it this way, is to just fuse between each layer, and then you know your piece will be sturdy and all the layers will blend together. Also, my whole project underneath is based in acrylic. Now that I have put wax on top of that acrylic, I cannot do any more acrylic work because acrylic and wax will not mix. It's like acrylic is a plastic. Once it dries, it's like a plastic, acrylic plastic, and that is not going to bond with the waxy substance that this encaustic medium has. So if I were to put acrylic on top of my encaustic, it would just pop off. It would just peel right off. As long as I keep all my acrylic work on the bottom, then I can build on top of that with encaustic and then keep going. If I wanted to add more layers to this of paint, then I would have to just switch to an oil-based paint. So keep that in mind, okay? All my acrylics are underneath, and then I put a really nice layer of encaustic on top. You can see now how kind of dreamy that has turned out. I totally drew that inspiration from the mood board. So there was that, and the only thing here, so I took a second, and I didn't do this on camera because it was so tedious, but I hammered in some finishing nails into my piece because I decided that I wanted to do a small weave here in the top of it, and I'm so glad I did. You're really going to enjoy this, where this goes from here, and I love the whole piece as it is. So I just hammered in some finishing nails, and then now I have used some sari ribbon, some sari silk ribbon that I rust dyed in one of my rust baths, and I created a little I can't think of the word. I just created a little area where I could weave this really fun yarn back and forth. So now I am weaving, that's what I'm doing, and you can kind of get a good idea here. There are lots of websites out there that I've been researching and kind of learning about different weaving techniques from. But one of my favorite things to do is pick interesting yarns to weave with. So this yarn here, it has like little loops on it, not quite pom-poms, but little like loops of thread, and it's so cool. Once I get more layers on of my weave, then I kind of scrunch it together and I get almost this like shag carpet effect. It's very cool. It's very different, but very cool. I was really glad to find this yarn. And it comes in different colors too. Excuse me. I have this cream color and I have a gray one and a blue one and maybe a couple others. Just don't tell anybody. Okay, so when I'm weaving, I do have a big plastic needle, and I got that. I bought a weaving kit. So it's really cool. It's pretty standard. It comes with a loom, and then it came with some thread and 2 of those plastic weaving needles, and then some instructions too. But basically, all you have to remember when you're weaving is to go opposite from one row to the next. So if on the first row, you go over, under, over, then on the next row, you're going to go under, over, under. And that's it. You just keep going back and forth like that until your weave is as full or as loose as you want, and you tie it off. And I kind of tuck the extras underneath the sides on this piece because it's a little bit different. I am not pulling it off. I'm leaving it on the loom, quote, unquote, that I have kind of built on top of my piece here. So remember those natural elements that I had in the beginning? I had like some bark and things like that. Well, I had this little pine cone, and when I tipped the pine cone over, it looked like a glorious flower. It was so pretty, and I just could not use it. So I now have crossed some DMC floss, dark gray, to add some dimension and contrast. And then now I've got this pine cone. Oh, it's so pretty. I love it. Real quick, what I did is I cut myself a big piece of muslin because I know that I want this pine cone to be very sturdy and held in place. So I put lots of gel medium underneath the pine cone, and I situated it exactly where I thought I wanted it. And then I wrapped muslin around it and tied it in a big knot so that that's now going to hold that in place. And then I'm just going to continue working on the bottom part of my board. So here's one more thing I'm going to tell you real quick. So I do this and then I hate it. So I take it off and redo it, but I'm not going to show you the redo. I'm just going to tell you what I changed. So I have done this technique 100 times when it comes to stamping. If you stamp on tissue paper and you tear the edges like this, then you can gel medium them to a surface or a project that you're working on, and the edges of the tissue paper will disappear, and then the stamp looks like you stamped it directly on your project. So if you're working on like a curved surface or you wanted to overlap some stamps or whatever, tissue paper is your friend for sure. So then I thought, well, maybe it will work the same in wax. If I tear these edges and I lay these seedlings, these are Viva Las Vegas stamps. This is a stamp that I designed for Viva Las Vegas stamps. It's a little seedling, like a helicopter seed. That's what we always called them growing up. And I thought, if I did this, stamp these on tissue paper, rip them out, and then fused them into my layer, then I thought that they would be perfect and seamless. They are not. But the way to do that is just to fussy cut them, and then it came out. So that's it. Then I'll just unwrap my piece, and this is the finished one. And I'm so happy with this piece, and of course, I'm so happy that you decided to join us today. Come back next month. Be sure to enter. We have prizes from Viva Las Vegas stamps this month, and the 2 other projects from the super talented Jen Ingle and Fiona Paltridge. So thank you again for being here. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you again.